Good morning, and thank you for joining us. If you're new, welcome. There is a place for you here.
We are a group of people doing our best to love God and those around us.
Our vision is to build transforming communities where everyone is included, accepted, and loved.
All of us are on a journey.
This is a place where you can ask difficult questions about faith and life.
We are here to help and support each other.
Grab a cup of coffee and make yourself at home.
If you have any questions, find someone with a green name tag. They'd be happy to help you.
Thanks for joining us.
No matter who you are or where you're from, we want you to know that you are welcome.
Good morning, everybody. I'm so glad to have you in worship this morning. I invite you all to stand for this time this morning to give it up to God. This morning, I have a mission for you. I want you to be engaged and welcome into the presence of the Lord, and I want you to lift your hearts up to just the magnificent just being that God is this morning. So let your worship represent what we're trying to give up to God this morning. Let's go in time of worship.
Found my I found my home. climb mountains if the mountains were where you hide. Oh, how far I scale the valleys if you grace the other side. And oh, how long have I chased rivers from sully seas to sense the rush of grace descending from the source of its supply. 'Cause in the heartaches and the heartache, you'll neither more or less inclined. I will search and stop at nothing. You're just not that hard to find. So I will praise you on the mountain. I will praise you in the mountains in my ways. You're the solid where my feet are. So I will praise you in the valleys of the sea. No less God within the shadows. No less faithful when the night leads me astray. You're the heaven when my heart in the heartaches of the sea. And oh, how far beneath your glory does your kindness extend apart, from where your feet rest on the sunrise to where you sweep the sinners past. And oh, how fast will you come running, if just to shadow me through the night. Trace my steps through all my failures, walk me out the other side. Could never see that mountain, that valley in Calvary, but for the one I call Good Shepherd, who like a lamb was slain for me. So I will praise you on the mountain, and I will praise you in the mountains in my ways. You're the head when my feet are. So I will praise you in the valleys of the sea. No less God within the shadows. No less faithful when the night leads me astray. You're the head where my heart is. In the highlands, in the heartache of the sea. Whatever I want, wherever I am, move mountains wherever I stand, wherever I walk, the valley of death, I'll sing in the shadows, my song of ascent. Wherever I walk, wherever I am, make the move mountains wherever I stand, wherever I walk, the valley of death, I'll sing in the shadows, my song of ascent. And from the waste of all valleys come the passions we call grace. Almighty river flowing upwards from a deep but empty grave. So I will praise you on the mountain, and I will praise you in the mountains in my way. You're the sun when my feet are. So I will praise you in the valleys of the sea. No less God within the shadows. No less faithful when the night leads me astray. You're the head where my heart
Well, good morning. My name is Michael Scott, and I am the pastor here, and I want to thank you for being with us both here in person and if you're watching online with us. Thank you for joining us. Now, how many of you over the last few weeks have been recalling some of the dumb things that you've learned lessons from in life? I mean, it's one of the best ways we learn, right? I mean, we can read about other people's dumb mistakes too, but I think it's important that we remember ours, because that's how we learn a lot. I like to say there are two ways we learn. We can learn from, this is what Rob Bell, he's kind of a spiritual coach of mine. Rob Bell says there are North Stars. There are things we can do in which things point us in a north or a good direction, and there's South Stars, right? We learn about things and things do, and we're like, ooh, we can learn by not doing it that way. So we've been focusing, I've been telling personal stories, and I've been listening to all of your stories as some of the things that maybe we've done where we've learned difficult lessons in them. And we're looking for wisdom, because wisdom, we have plenty of knowledge. I saw this quote this week, actually, I wrote it down. So he says, we are drowning in information while starving for wisdom. Drowning in information, yet starving for wisdom. Do you feel like that? We have all this information. We have access to more information now than we ever have. We have more education than we ever have in the history of time. Yet we can't seem to quite figure out how to use that information and have wisdom with it, right? Now, what do we say? Wisdom comes with age, right? But we started this series in this book of Proverbs. There's several books in the Bible. There's a lot of wisdom to be gained in all the books, but there's specific books like Ecclesiastes and Proverbs, and we've been reading stories from them. And we started with Proverbs. Now, both of these books were compiled by this guy named Solomon. Solomon was a king. He was the son of King David. Have you ever heard of those people? David was the one who slung the rock around and killed the giant, right? And Solomon was his son. And Solomon was very successful, and he put together, and he put all this wisdom together. And so we have Proverbs and Ecclesiastes, and we've been reading stories out of both of those books to hopefully gain wisdom. And when we started with the very first week was that wisdom comes, or the book, it says, is for everybody, whether you're young and maybe you don't feel like you have wisdom, or if you're a little more experienced and you have a little gray. A good friend of mine walked in this morning, and I darkened my beard. I know some of that's going to shock some of you, and I haven't darkened it in a while, so she's like, what's all that gray? I'm almost like, yep, it's there. So maybe some of us who have a little more gray and experience, maybe this book is also for all of us, right? It's not just for people who are young. And it starts out the very first chapter, and it says, the thing you do to start, the thing that you start with to gain wisdom is what? None of you have been here for the first week? We bow, right? It says bow to God, but it's the act of bowing. What are we saying? When we bow, we don't like this word, but we are submitting to, right? That we are allowing something to teach us. Now, the language the Bible uses, and the language I would use too, is that we allow God to use life lessons to teach us things. And so we bow to them. That's the very first thing we start with, because if we say we have all the answers and we know it all, it's really hard to gain wisdom when we use or think those things. The second week, we talked about generosity. We talked about work. I challenged everybody. In Proverbs, in Ecclesiastes, it talks about how it's the work itself is the important part. And a lot of us live for a paycheck, or we think that we work for a paycheck. But the Bible challenges that idea. The Bible challenges us and says that the joy of life is not in the paycheck that can buy the things that you think are going to make you happy. The joy in life is found in the work itself. So not just the thing you do for a living, but in all the work. It's in the work. Now, why is that? Why would God, Jesus, all the authors of the Bible, why would they say that? Because if it's about the paycheck or about the money or about the things, then what do? We want to hoard them. You see, if we find joy in the average, mundane, everyday way of life, then we're able to let go of our resources. We can share them freely. And so I talked a lot about generosity, that we find joy in the work, not joy in the paycheck. But that doesn't align with our values, does it very well? I mean, how many of you get up and go to work and be like, ooh, I love this even if I didn't get paid? Probably nobody. Sometimes. I don't know who said that, but I love you. So that's great. All right. So, Emily. It's Elizabeth, but yes, I got it. Okay. So, last week, we talked about time. Now, I hope you all had a great 4th of July weekend. I know my family and I did. We actually didn't have in-person services. So for the first time since COVID, we embraced this online thing because none of you wanted to come, which is fine. I wanted you to spend time with your family. That was the whole point. I'm trying to get volunteers, and the band member, I'm like, let's just embrace it. We have all this technology with these cameras. And so then the sermon was about time, which actually played in perfectly. Because what is time? Time is something that we create, right? We're measuring how massive bodies rotate around each other, and it's the thing that we measure. But time, it's a construct. To be outside of time is the thing that we're going for. There's this word called eternity, and there's this story in Ecclesiastes 3 where it said eternity is set in the hearts of all of us. Inside each of us, there is this thing called eternity. And eternity is the idea that we can exist outside of time, that God exists outside of time, and that we can participate in that. Now, I can't break that down. If you're interested in that, go watch last week. But Jesus, God, everybody in the Bible invites us into this space of eternity. And eternity simply means that we have to participate in the right here, right now, in the present. That by participating in the present, we are experiencing a piece or a glimpse of eternity. We can be beyond time. Today, maybe the most important one that we struggle with, I'm going to be talking about our words. Now, how many of you have used your words to hurt somebody? It's okay, put your hands up. Brittany, I work with you. No, I couldn't help myself. All right, how many have used your words to help somebody heal? Hopefully we are doing these things, but words are one of those things that I think we struggle with. And with the emergence of technology and social media and email and texting, words aren't just the words we speak. Words are also the words that we type. For all you keyboard kings and queens out there. But I want to talk about those. Now, I think sometimes we use our words, and I hear people that will use words that are hurtful, and it's under the guise of truth. How many have heard somebody say something, you're like, ooh, that didn't feel very good. Yeah, but I'm true. I'm being truthful. Okay. Well, how to make the person feel? I'm going to give you an example for when my daughters were younger. I can't remember if it was Kylie or Kira. I love telling stories about my kids. My wife and they are shopping at Walmart, if I remember correctly, and they're going through the checkout line, and the lady that was checking them out had some teeth issues. They were disintegrating. Okay, so there was some teeth issues, and my daughter being young, she's heard us tell her, right, every single night, what's going to happen if you don't brush your teeth? They're going to rot out of your head. That's what we tell them, right? We scare them into brushing their teeth. And so she's heard this from us for a couple years, and she looks up at this lady, and she's like, Mommy, she doesn't brush her teeth. Now, she's not wrong. I mean, that's probably not wrong. I don't know. I don't know what that person's struggle was or what was happening. Was that Kylie or Kira? It was Kira, okay. Bus thrown. Okay. So, she just, and I think she said it like several times, and Stacy's like, shh, no, we don't need to say. Now, was it truthful? Probably. But was it necessary? In her mind, it was. She's going to go buy her a toothbrush and toothpaste and hand it to her. I use that innocent story because I think we do that all the time. You know, we live in this amazing country we call America. And what do we hang our hats on half the time? Freedom of what? Speech. Now, that is a great thing. So don't hear me wrong. Freedom of speech is amazing. It's one of the things that makes this country different than others, is that we can use our voices. We can use our voices and say what we like. But just because we can say something doesn't mean that we should say something. And I think the human condition is that we're not sure how to quite find that balance. We want to say things, and we want to quote the Constitution or think, well, it's my right. Okay. What does that matter? The words you're using, what does it do to those around you? How is it affecting those around you? Just because it may be true does not mean that you should say it. This is where we start to begin to talk about wisdom with our words. Now, are y'all hearing me? I think we do this. I think the human condition is we have words, And we use them whether they're typed or they're put out on social media or we're having a conversation with somebody. And there's two ways every conversation we have can go. We can use our words to hurt people, because people who are hurt, what do? Hurt people hurt people. And I would say the inverse or the opposite is true. People that have healed, people that have experienced healing in their life, I'm including all of you. I hope you're here because you've experienced some kind of healing in your life. You recognize there's this thing, this energy, this force, this thing we call God. It was made flesh with Jesus, and that it has changed your life and the way you live, and you have healed in some way from it. But I believe that healed people also have this capacity to heal others. Specifically with our words. Our words are so vitally important to the way we live our life, to who we are, to how we develop and how people develop around us. And this is not a new idea. The passages I'm going to read this morning are thousands and thousands of years old. This is something that humanity has struggled with. And we're going to start in Proverbs. So again, this is the book compiled by Solomon with just bits of good information. He says, "Careless words stab like a sword, but wise words bring healing." So there's this idea, right? Words that aren't helpful. Notice he doesn't use the word truth in here. There's nothing about truth. Things can be truthful, it just doesn't mean you need to say them, right? Let's go, that's Proverbs 12:18. Let's go to chapter 15, verse 4. "As a tree gives us fruit, healing words give us life. But evil words crush the spirit. Pleasant words are flowing honey, sweet to the taste and healing to the bones." So Solomon, thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago, was writing this because people were struggling with their words. They're using their words. What's the analogy? It's like stabbing somebody. It's piercing. It's hurtful. But healing words, it's beautiful, like how a tree blossoms and has fruit and flowers. That's a beautiful thing. Now we've started and focused in Proverbs and Ecclesiastes, but I actually want to introduce another scripture this morning. One that's not in Proverbs or Ecclesiastes. It's in the book of James. And I think this speaks a lot to us in the struggle that we have today. It said, "It's like when we place a metal bit into a horse's mouth to ride it." Now, I'm not sure how many of you ride horses, but go with me for a second. "We can control its entire body with the slightest movement of our hands. Have you seen a massive ship sailing effortlessly across the water? Despite its immense size and the fact that it is propelled by mighty winds, a small rudder directs the ship in any direction that the pilot chooses. It's just the same with our tongues. It's a small muscle capable of marvelous undertakings." So he uses, because they had horses and they had ships. Well, what do we have now? It's the same analogy. What do we move around in every day? Cars. And compared to the car, there's this tiny little steering wheel. And what he's saying is this tiny little thing completely dictates of where that car moves. He's inviting us into a place saying that the tongue is a thing that guides us and moves us into the spaces of life. Now, what I think the author is saying is that words have a lot of power. Now, what are words? I want to spend just a second what a word is. So you have a thought and an image in your brain, right? Your brain processes that, and then we have languages, so then we vocalize an image or a thought of some kind, right? So that is a word. So we speak those words. So as we speak those words, what do those words then do to other people who are listening to them? They are shaping the image in their head and in their brain. So it's creating an image or a thought based on a word that you said. So I believe, when you speak words, it influences and shapes people's images and ideas of things. And when we speak words, I believe that the inverse is also true. When we say something, it also influences that image or the idea in our head. And so you've heard people use language like speaking things into existence. Actually, there's this beautiful poem in our history. It's called Genesis. It's a poem about creation where God speaks things into existence. Now, was that a science lesson? No. But it's the idea that words have so much power that when you speak things, they shape the images and the ideas in your head and of those around you. So as you're speaking them, you're literally guiding your body, your soul, your spirit, your mind by the way you talk into the direction of which you will move in life. Now, is that a scary thought for some of you? Nobody? It is for me. I think it's some of the conversations I have. I'm like, that's really the direction in life I want to go? So before you even take action, so what I would say is the words that we speak influence the ideas in our head and the images, and then the images in our head and the ideas in our head influence what? Our actions. So they're all directly connected. Words have so much power. You know, I mentioned this last week in last week's sermon, but initially, in our tradition, the Israelite, Hebrew, Jewish tradition, the name of God was never used. You didn't say the name of God. When Abraham encounters what we would call God, Abraham asked the thing that he's encountering, "What do I call you? What are you?" Does God say, "I am God"? The answer is no. He says, "I am," which is about presence, but it's also speaking to something else. It's speaking to this idea that you cannot encapsulate God into a word. And so God was never actually named. Our tradition that God was actually never named. And so you see words in the Bible like Lord. You see words that reference something that is greater than us, but the second you speak it, because when I say the word God, what do most of you think of? I mean, the image we've been given in culture is a white bearded man in the sky, right? That's limiting. So even the words we use are so very important. That's another reason why we aren't supposed to have idols. That's why even the image of God in our Bible, it encourages not to do that. Because the second you give an image to God, what happens? We've had this conversation before, but if God is portrayed as a white bearded man in the sky, and you're a person who's been hurt by a white bearded man, what does God become to you? Somebody who can hurt you. That's why God does not have an image. The image of God, which we are created in, which we're going to get to in a second, the image that we're created in is not a physical image. The image of God is goodness, wholeness, faith, joy, love, and peace. It's the thing that God represents, but we can't quite define. So even in our history, the words we use are so vitally important to the way it shapes us and moves us and invites us into different spaces in life. It's a rudder. The things we say guide the path of our life. I'm not saying there's not external forces, that they're not systemic issues. Don't hear me say that. Say that you do have a choice in part of your path of life. And the words that you speak are vitally important. That's why the words specifically you speak about yourself. I have a shirt on. You matter. That's what it says. Your words also matter. The way you speak about yourself or those around you. It's very important because as you speak them, it makes them real. It takes a thought, it makes it real, it makes it tangible, and it can influence the way people think and the things that they do and the way they take action. All right, let's keep reading. And do you know how many forest fires begin with a single ember from a small campfire? The tongue is a blazing fire seeking to ignite an entire world of vices. James gets a little negative, just a little warning, okay? The tongue is unique among all parts of the body because it is capable of corrupting the entire body. All right, here's this reinforcement. We know now with science and psychology that this is true, but James feels it and he knows it. He's writing about it. If that were not enough, it ignites and consumes the course of creation with a fuel that originates in hell itself. Whew, right? Humanity is capable of taming every bird and beast in existence, even reptiles and sea creatures great and small. But no one has ever demonstrated the ability to tame their own tongue. It is a spring of restless evil, brimming with toxic poisons. Right? So it gets really ugly, and he's like, your tongue's like it's from hell and all this other, right? But what I think he's saying is our default is to hurt those around us because all of us have been hurt, right? There's not one person in this room who hasn't been hurt by somebody's words. There's probably not somebody in this room that hasn't been hurt by somebody's words this week. Words can hurt or they can heal. So our default is to hurt back. And he's saying this is how he's describing it. He's likening it to, like, this is like hell. When you find yourself in this place and you've been hurt by somebody, and then what comes out of you when somebody's ugly to you is just more ugliness, that's like hell. Nobody wants to live that way. He says, ironically, the same tongue can be both an instrument of blessing and a weapon that hurls curses upon others who are created in God's own image. There's that God's own image idea. We are all created in the same likeness, and not a physical likeness. We are all created with something inside of us. Those things are good. In this poem in Genesis, God creates everything. He speaks it all into existence. And at the end of the day, he says, and it was good. I believe that all of us, this isn't rose-colored glasses. We read this from our origin stories. We were all created, and inside each of us is goodness. But within inside each of us is this something else. There's hurt and there's pain. And when that hurt and pain flares up, you can read about this in psychology. When it flares up, we go limbic, we go to fight, flight, or freeze, and we lash out. And because we're hurting, what do we want to do? We want others to hurt with us. Why? Because misery loves company. So how do we overcome that? I think most of us, we know that we shouldn't use hurtful language. Now, I want to remind you of that. I want to point us to the North Star saying that we shouldn't use hurtful language. We also shouldn't say maybe helpful things in a hurt tone. Have you ever seen Steve Carell? He has this character, and he yells really nice things, but in a really loud German accent. Those things like, I love you, but it sounds like, ooh. It's important to remember that it's not just the words in which we're saying, it's the way in which we say them. I think we would all agree that we shouldn't be doing those things. What I want to invite you into a space of is that we need to be proactively leaning into conversations that are life-giving and that are healing. It's not good enough to just not say a bad thing, right? I think we can all agree on that, but that's not good enough. That's not what these scriptures invite us into. They talk about healing words. James says the tongue has the ability to do either or, and it's our choice. We can choose what we do with those words. How many of you know the comedian Sarah Silverman? Super controversial, okay? She can be funny, she can be ridiculous, but she's a comedian. And a few years ago in 2018 or 19, she tweeted something, and it was political. And so I'm not getting into the politics of it, the story I think is beautiful. And she tweets something, and some other man gets on there and calls her the C word. Now, I'm not a woman, but I'm told that's like the worst thing you could say to a woman. And so this happens, and so what is Sarah Silverman left with this in this moment? She's going to come back and be like, you're a donkey, right? I mean, that's what most of us would do. Do you ever find yourselves trolling social media or an email that you didn't like and you respond back? I mean, you've heard the rules, right? Type the email out, just don't ever send it. Sit on it for 24 hours, right? Sometimes typing the words out will make you feel better. I would challenge that even putting the words out there, if they're not healthy, is not beneficial, but maybe it's a better alternative than sending that nasty email. But she didn't do that. She goes to his profile and says, hey, I've seen you're struggling. Tell me what that's about. And this guy on social media opens up about how he was abused as a child and has deep emotional and physical scars from it. And he has pain. He has physical pain, and he has a really bad back, and he doesn't have insurance, and he has all these emotional and spiritual depletions in his life, and he's struggling. And they end up having this dialogue, this horrible situation. You can't, there's not another word that conveys something worse to a woman that has been used in a scenario in a public forum, yet the person doesn't respond that way. They respond in a different manner. You know, in our tradition, in the Jewish tradition, a lot of times rabbis were asked questions. And you know how the rabbis responded? Jesus does this a lot. Do they answer the question? Often they respond with another question. Now, why is that? If you want to get a response out of somebody, you just respond. If you want to engage in dialogue, if you actually want to have a healthy dialogue, you ask another question. This is how we have healthy dialogue and arguments. And so she does this. She asks him a question. And they have this amazing dialogue. And it gets to the end of it, and he says he doesn't have insurance or a way to get help, and he has this really bad back. And she's like, oh my gosh, I've been there. I've had a bad back. And she goes to social media with her millions of followers, and she says, this man needs help. Can somebody help him? And guess what happens? This man goes and gets help for his back, and hopefully the invitation was he committed to going and getting help for some psychological and spiritual needs as well. That conversation could have went very differently. And she could have called him out. She could have been like, you're being a donkey. And she would not have been wrong. That would have been truthful. But it didn't need to be said. It doesn't help anything. I want to encourage everybody who's hearing this, whether you're in the room today, whether you're listening to this later on in the week, or maybe on a Wednesday night, wherever you find yourself, all of us are going to have opportunities this week to use our verbal words, to use our written words, to use our typed words. And I want to remind you that every time you are typing or saying or using words, that they are literally guiding you, who you are as a person, and guiding and leading those around you. Those words have a lot of power. And it's not enough to just not use bad words. That's not good enough. The important part is when people hurt you, and they're going to, it's going to happen to you. When they hurt you, when they dig in, when they jab you with that proverbial knife that we talked about in Proverbs, that you don't stab them back. That maybe you respond with a question or a loving response. Now, I'm not saying lay down and let people abuse you. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying in every opportunity in life, you have a choice. And you can respond in truth, or you can respond in love. And the space I want to invite you into this week in your texts and your emails and your social media and your conversations with those around you is a space of love. As you think on that, as you beat yourself up for the horrible things you've already said this morning, let's go to God and ask God for help with this. God, we thank you for the opportunity to speak love into people's life. God, there is also truth, and I'm not trying to negate truth. But the truth is that you love us, and it is our job to love you back and to love others. God, help us to speak that into people's lives and even into our own life. Help us use words that are healing and loving. Not just to not use words that hurt, but to proactively be pursuing opportunities to love people around us, to speak a new truth, a new paradigm, a new form of love into their life. God, may those words direct us towards you, towards goodness, towards love and wholeness. God, we just ask for help with that. Those opportunities are all around us. God, help us to be aware of them and help us to act on them. It's in your name that we pray. Amen.
I invite you all to stand for our last song of worship this morning. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Are we really gonna hide?
I hope that there's a fire in all of us today. Like that scripture said, it only starts with a small fire that burns into a great flame that catches the entire forest on fire. May that flame, may that spark start inside of you today. Go in peace.